Do we have everyone now?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like to welcome everyone to our meeting.
Hang on just a second, April.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
There we go. Okay, we're live streaming now, April.
Okay. All right. I want to welcome everyone to our May 18th meeting. It is now 6:30 by my time, so let's call the meeting to order. Is there anything that we need to add to our agenda?
No,
Okay. Let's look over and have an approval of the minutes of the April 20th board meeting.
I make a motion to approve.
Okay. Do we have a second?
Second.
Go ahead.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. The minutes will be approved as written. Now we're going to move into our reports. So let's have the treasurer's report, please.
okay, we had a starting balance of $1,706,358 on March 31st. Our income for April was $13,252. All taxes and a little bit of interest since we've been closed. Our expenses for April were $48,590. That included $3,000 for painting and a little over $2,000 for floor maintenance. Our ending balance on April 30th was $1,671,020.
Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the April check register and the financial report?
I make a motion to approve.
Okay. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Let's move on to our librarian's report.
Okay. First, we have stats. So these are quite a bit different than what you're all used to seeing, just because I didn't think it was relevant to include the circulation stats in there, just because we have been closed. For Wi-Fi, though, we have had 96 people using our Wi-Fi outside of the library, and then 24 using it via the bookmobile. One thing with the website visits that we discovered is since we're closed, normally our public access computers, any browser that opens on that computer, anytime a browser is opened, that's going to count as a website visit because it automatically goes to our website. So if you take off kind of that normal computer use, we're about close to maybe a little bit higher than our normal website visits. Similarly with database access, if you take off ABC Mouse and Ancestry, because those are two databases that are used only in the library, our database use is actually up 311%. We have, of course, Kentucky Libraries Unbound is up quite a bit this month, 28%. We actually have 17 people who just started using it and and then we had 5 people sign up for virtual library cards. So one little tidbit that's not on here is we just sent out our county-wide newsletter, went out a few days ago. Since then, we've had 9 new people sign up for a virtual library card. So like in a matter of days. So that's awesome.
That is.
For summer reading, we plan to start that on June 1st. The way we're going to kind of work it as of right now is participants of all ages are going to be able to log the days that they read on a form on our website. If they don't have internet, then they can call the library and either talk to staff if we're available or leave a message and we'll get them entered. We're going to do 1 entry for each participant this year. And what we're going to do is set some goals and kind of track that to go by days read. And so we've done hours and time. So we're really just kind of trying to simplify it this year. And we'll also be doing some program that's going to include hopefully some virtual performances. And then also we're working on take-home kits that we'll be able to give out through the drive-through. For maintenance, Rodney Miles replaced the battery in the bookmobile. As he was towing it though, I guess one of the bottom mirror on the side mirror fell out. So he's still got to replace that. We had Sean Morton repaint the meeting room lobby and all of the public bathrooms. Cintas came down we've been getting the trouble alarms again. So they tried troubleshooting that. Everything's working fine. So their thing was, if we can call them and have them come down when a trouble alarm is active, they'll be better able to troubleshoot it. The problem with that is we get these trouble alarms at between 1 and 3 o'clock in the morning. So nobody's going to be available at that time. And typically they only last like maybe 1 minute. I think the longest one was like 15 minutes. So hopefully we don't have any problems with that, but we're probably going to have to keep getting the trouble alarms. Basically, it's just the signal drops down just a little bit too low. We also had Seco come down and repair some of the lights that are out. They replaced 2 strips of the LED with LED lights in front of the circulation desk, with 1 light pointing down and 1 light pointing up. So that solves the lighting issue. Unfortunately, they're still buzzing. So we're thinking that that's coming from the cupola instead of the lights in front of the circulation. So we'll have them back to fix that at a later date. For professional activities, I've attended the virtual North Region meetings, and also the Pendleton County Community Wellness Coalition has been doing virtual meetings. And Rotary has resumed with virtual meetings as well. So I've been attending all of those. Tanya attended 4 virtual North Region youth meetings. For fee amnesty, so all fees prior to when we closed have been removed. So here's the breakdown of it, because I know last month when we talked, it was kind of a big chunk. So 456 cardholders had their fees waived. So these are more current patrons. That amount was $22,968. The remainder of that lump sum, so that $76,446 was actually older than that statute of limitations. So we completely deleted those along with the card holders. So we deleted 1,570 card holders that met that criteria. Our current patrons are 5,579. So that's about 38% of our Pendleton County population. For the Library IQ qualitative collection evaluation, the report that's included in the packet, it was based on observations that they made prior to when we did the weeding and inventory in January. So a lot of the recommendations that they have in there, we've actually already taken. We've combined the sci-fi collections. We just created a separate collection code for level readers. So that's the kind of step between picture books and chapter books. It doesn't impact anything on the patron level, but just gives us a way to better track that. We also separated out the large print, and everything in the adult collection has nothing on the bottom shelves. We met last week and to establish some goals for moving forward. So some of that includes just improving our marketing. We're working on creating graded bookmarks, and also genre or author read-alike type bookmarks, just to kind of help promote our collections. We're going to try changing out some of our displays a little bit more frequently, and maybe trying out some different locations, and then going through and replacing dated nonfiction. We discussed creating a mystery fiction collection, but that's really going to take, it's going to be a huge undertaking. So we're likely to kind of postpone that one for a while. And then we also reviewed our collection development and circulation policies. So we'll talk about that a little bit more in new business. With E-rates. So E-rates, actually, I got some really good news. We're actually eligible to receive an additional discount of $1,594.77. This is going to be on, it's the maintenance and technical support subscriptions for all the network upgrades that we did 2 years ago. So it's kind of like found money. So that's a good thing. But we won't see that until the following fiscal year, so 2021-22. And for the Kentucky Humanities CARES Act Emergency Operating Grant, I'm happy to let you all know that we were awarded a $5,000 grant from Kentucky Humanities. So that's going to help cover some of these expenses for PPE and additional cleaning supplies and things like that.
That's awesome.
Yes, I was so happy. And that's all I have for my report.
Okay, we'll move on to the regional librarians report, please.
And that just gives some information about the census, some workforce partnership resources that KDLA is offering. They're looking into changing some of the requirements for initial and renewal certification for library staff. And then it gives some dates for upcoming DLG due dates. So that's to do with our budget and all of this stuff, normal end of year stuff for us. That's It for that.
Okay. In our old business, do we have an update on the sale of our Highway 27 property?
There's no new news to report on that.
Okay.
I'm not surprised right now.
Yeah, I'm not either.
All right, let's move on to our COVID-19 response.
So the plan that is in the packet is what was submitted to the governor's office. So this was submitted by KDLA, but it was a statewide a statewide effort, including directors throughout the state and the Kentucky Public Library Association as well. So far, we have no word on approval, except for a reaffirmation that libraries are not included in business or any other business type when it comes to reopening. So that covers people actually coming into the library. So still, we're completely out for that. So right now, based on this plan, we would be considered in level 1. So that's zero contact services. For level 2, I spoke with Three Rivers Health Department, and they said that we would be good to proceed into level 2 as soon as we have all of the needed PPE and cleaning supplies and all of that. So what that would include is drive-through service and material lending only. Still, nobody would be allowed to come into the library. We would only accept materials through our Dropbox, and then we would quarantine all of those materials for at least 72 hours. It would be limited hours open, limited homebound delivery, and still most of our staff working from home. For staff working at the library, the plan is to utilize the self-screening option for health checks. So what that means is they're going to go through and answer a set of questions and take their temperature before they even leave home. So if they do have any of those symptoms, they're not even going to make it into the library. Part of the healthy at work guidance that they are offering, so any employee with symptoms has to be tested. So we would direct them to their health provider or the health department. Masks would be required, and then gloves provided. So that's both to protect the staff that are working together, and also any materials that we're sending out to patrons. If somebody happens to be asymptomatic, it's going to keep that from getting on any materials that would go out through the drive-through to patrons.
Just for clarification, I'm sorry, Melissa, just for clarification, masks for everyone or just the staff? Does that include anyone coming in? Or is it just the staff would be required to wear masks?
So it would be staff, and based on the criteria for government, it would also include any contract workers.
But not patrons?
Well, no patrons would be allowed to come in at this point.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
Yeah, you're all right. Let's see. Staff would have to sign off on required training before being allowed to come to work. And then we would also limit our break room use. That's part of that no community areas. So my goal, what I would like to do with level 2 is, if at all possible, I'd like to start that either sometime between June 1st and June 8th. Where we're at now is we've pretty much ordered the PPE and the cleaning supplies that we need. Most of them still have a delivery date set for late May and or early June at this point. So it's really again going to depend on when we get all of that in. And then I'm also working on finalizing all of the training and like health check forms and all of that. So assuming that we get all of that stuff in and I get all of that finished, I would like to, my goal is June 1st. After that, so kind of according to this plan still, with level 3 and moving forward, level 3 is going to start limited in-person services. And what that might actually look like, is kind of still in progress. We're kind of trying to work through that. But it may include computer use by appointment only. We're still not going to be able to have people coming in and, browsing the collections. Probably some reduced contact bookmobile services. So she might be able to go out to a community stop, but nobody would be able to come onto the bookmobile. She would just kind of have materials ready to check out and give to them. And then according to this plan, level 3 would allow limited size meetings. Our current plan is to use the meeting room to quarantine materials. So if we're quarantining materials in there, we're not going to be able to allow meetings in there as well. So that's kind of where we're at with reopening. As long as that sounds good to everybody, then I'll proceed with a goal of June 1st.
I think it sounds good.
I feel like that's the right move, concerning the libraries are already there kind of now into the level 2. So I feel like that's something we should move into as quickly as we could.
Right.
Sounds
Yeah.
good to me.
Kenton, Campbell, and Boone just started their drive-through service today. So hopefully too, with us being a couple weeks behind, if they run into any major issues, we can kind of learn from them.
Yeah,
as well.
absolutely.
I agree.
Okay.
Okay. We will move on to our new business and our policy reviews.
Okay. So the circulation policy, there's like one typo in there. So that's corrected. And then part of our collection management meeting the other day, we discussed DVDs. One of the suggestions that they had made, so Library IQ, one of the suggestions that they had made was to cut the DVD time limit for circulation back down to 1 week. So I did a pretty extensive look through of our new DVDs. And for the most part, they're all coming back in a week anyway. There's a few that may be keeping it for 2 weeks. So we really kind of came to the conclusion that that's not going to solve anything. But what we would like to do is set a limit on the number of new DVDs that somebody can pick out at one time. So right now, an adult can get 4, and then teens and kids can get 2. So we would decrease it to 2 for everybody, including adults. But what we would also like to do is increase the limit on the older DVDs that people can check out. So we'd like to increase that to 10 for both adults and right now, adults could get 4 and teens could get 2. So the reasons why we had such a low limit, one originally was a collection size. We had a smaller collection, so the smaller your collection size, the lower your limit needs to be. The other reason was we had all of these discs stored on the carousels. Since we're not doing that now, it's not taking any more staff time to check out 10 DVDs versus 4 because we're not having to go pull them from the carousels. So what's presented in this basically is that we would limit new DVDs to 2 and then allow adults and teens to borrow 10 older DVDs. For the collection development policy, pretty much all of the changes in that are just to kind of clean up the language, the wording, the grammar, and then clarify what we're already doing. It's really not changing anything at all as far as how we do things or what we do. We did, on the recommendation of Library IQ, add a section for self-published materials, and their original recommendation was the paragraph that's there for self-published materials. But also it included anything by local people, and it was that we simply wouldn't buy self-published materials. They needed to be donated. We have, that I feel like that's one area where we really try to support our residents. If somebody from Pendleton County wrote a book, even if it's self-published, so that might be like Marvin Sullivan or Doc Collins or Desiree Williams, just to name a few that happen to pop into my head. But we really want to support those people, and those people come in and do programs for us also. So we just, don't feel right saying, hey, we're only going to put your book in our collection if you donate it to us.
Right.
We want to encourage them to actually contact us and hopefully do some programming around that book. So it's mutually beneficial for a whole lot of people. And then we added the patron request section, which is pretty much in line with what we've been doing all along. It just kind of puts it in writing. And then of course we would like to post this one on our circulation is already on our website. If all of those changes are okay with everybody, I would just need a motion to approve.
I motion.
I motion.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll move on to the audit, please.
Sam with Kraft, Weininger and Noble and Company. It's kind of a mouthful of a name. So these are the same group that did our audit last year. They contacted me to see if, one, do we want to go with them again this year? And two, there's an option where they can rotate their audit team. So they have enough people working there. Like last year, it was Jared and Sam. So one presented and one actually did all of the audit work. And then they have 2 other staff that they can put into rotation. With it only being the second year that we've used them, it's probably not really necessary that we do that. But if that's something you all want to do, I can let them know.
I'm fine either way.
I mean, I don't have
Okay.
I'm fine with whatever you think is best.
Okay. So I'll let them know that we'll just continue with the same team this year. They recommend that you change who does your audit on a regular basis. 1 year isn't necessary. Next year we might want to change that.
Agreed.
Um,
Are we ready for the budget amendment part?
yeah.
Okay.
So what I got is, okay, when you go to the library, and you go to pull into the first part of the parking lot, there's an area at the end that's got nice big pretty rock gravel, and then you've got the gravel that we have in the beds, like up around the door. So I was talking to Jimmy with JC Tree Service, and the small rock really kind of needs to be refreshed. So his recommendation, originally was, well, let's add a little bit more gravel to that and refresh it. So I asked him, I said, well, and I know the larger rock it's more expensive. But I had asked him to give me a price to actually change everything to the nice big pretty rock. So the nice thing about that is if we go to the larger rock, we're never going to have to refresh it, at least for like the next 10 to 20 years. We're not going to have to do any mulch. So in the long run, it's going to save us thousands of dollars. Right now, of course, I don't have enough in our building maintenance budget to cover that. We do have some extra in our utilities line item for electric. So what I'm asking is if we can move $4,500 from the utilities line item to building maintenance, and also $5,000 from reserves to cover this. It comes out to a total of $13,025. We do still have some remaining that was designated for this already. It's just a little bit more costly if we want to go with the larger rock. Given that in a matter of 4 or 5 years, we're going to recoup this money and not having to pay for additional rock or mulch. I think it's a good investment, but you all have to be the ones to make that amendment.
I say do it.
I agree.
My only concern is this like one bid we got, or are they doing it, or is someone else come in, or did we check with like multiple landscape companies, or is this just using them that it costs that much?
This is using them, and the bulk of it is just the cost of the rock, because it does have to be gotten from up north. It's going to have to actually be trucked in on a dump truck. It's not something that anybody, our local people have around here. So where he would normally get gravel from, they don't have this kind of rock. So that's really where the added expense is coming in.
I think, I mean, we're going to recoup the cost. I think it's fine.
Is there any more discussion about it before we make a motion? Okay, so do we have a motion then to, and I want to make sure I say this right, transfer money from the utilities line and what we have in reserve to the building maintenance?
I make a motion to do so.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All right, we will move on to our budget. I'm going to call it the draft, please.
Okay. So what is in your packet is draft, and normally before presenting a official version, I will meet with Stacy to kind of go over all the miniature details. But because moving in for next year's budget, because all three versions of the budget that I presented are going to result in various large amounts needing to be used from our reserves, I kind of wanted to at least present this to everybody as a whole. So where we're at with this is with revenue. One, state aid has been removed. Two, with especially with taxes, and because that's like 95% of our revenue. Everybody from other library directors, Chip Sutherland, who was here last month, anybody official that I've talked to or accountant, everybody says plan on incoming tax revenue not being good, just because of everything going on with COVID. So taxes and all of these are calculated at a 10% decrease. For the receipts and cash section, this is going to change. I mean, I can tell you that because we're not through our year yet. Right now, so looking, back at the financial report, we're currently about $36,418 under budget and revenue. We're going to make at least that much this year. We've already gotten close to that in the May deposits. That's just not reflected in these reports yet. But it's probably, it might be a little bit over, but not much. So the money that we decided last year that we were going to pull from reserves, that's probably all going to be spent. There are a few exceptions to that. There's some things that we've, excuse me. There's some things that we've already set in motion that were already budgeted, that we already had planned, that we might not be able to get an invoice for before the end of the year, just because of everything going on. So one example of that is the shredding program and some of the summer reading programs that we had lined up. Those, our plan is to reschedule them in the fall when we're able to actually have people coming in and using, participating in those. Another example is the signage and shelving that we had planned. I've got a meeting with her later this month. But again, we might not actually get to have that work done before the end of the year and invoiced. So the first version of the expenses includes those just as a carryover. So we're not spending it in June. Can we spend it in July? Version 2 and 3 just says, we weren't able to spend that. We're kind of tight. We're not going to. We're just not going to do that right now. We can revisit signage and shelving later. We can, pay for the regular program budget, but not carrying money over. The first set of figures, so the first kind of column in expenses, that based on our current budget. That's based on keeping everything normal. It does allow for a little bit of the carryover just because we haven't spent that money in this year's budget. So as close to normal is a 2% increase to this year's expenses. That's including things like, just an increased cost and maintenance. Landscaping is costing us a little bit more, mowing and all of that, just because we have a new person doing it. Costs are going up, utilities, all of that. Health insurance is going up 9%. So that's all included in the first column budget. But with that is if revenue comes in as projected. So hopefully, we get to the end of the next year and we've actually brought in a little bit more in revenue. So that we wouldn't have to use all of the money from reserves. If revenue comes in as projected, and we really do see a 10% decrease in taxes, then we would need to pull for that first column budget $143,000 from reserves. The middle one, I went through and I made some kind of moderate cuts throughout everything. It's going to, include things like decreasing the number of countywide newsletters that we're able to send out. It's going to include things like not budgeting as much for new computers. So that means we're going to have to keep some of our computers past their warranty. And year after year, that's going to continue. So over time, computers will be older and start breaking down before we actually get to replace them. It's cutting materials by 5%, supplies by 8%, program supplies by 10%, and still resulting in needing to use just over 100,000 from our reserves. The third version is drastically cut. I mean, that's like I could do more cuts, but then we're going to get into cutting hours open, cutting staff, heavily cutting programs and supplies, and materials as well. That one would be, first, it would be a 4% decrease from this year's expenses. Second, it would still require us to pull over 73,000 from reserves. So to keep any kind of semblance whatsoever, to our current budget or even our significantly cut budget, based on what they're projecting for revenues, we're going to have to pull some from reserves. None of this takes into consideration tax rates. So this is assuming that our tax rates stay exactly the same. The other aspect that I wanted to make sure to discuss is personnel. So even if you all say, well, let's go with version 1 of the proposed expenses, that doesn't necessarily mean that we have to provide a 3% raise to staff. We can provide something lower. So to give you all kind of an idea of one, where we're starting with personnel is because we did the various restructuring mid-year last year, we're already starting with a 1.2% increase in personnel expenses over last year. When you add in the increased cost for health insurance, that bumps it up to 2.2%. We also, when we did the restructuring, we had planned one final stage of that restructuring, and that was to bump up the local history and genealogy position to a, I think it would be a classification 4. So that's the only full-time position that we currently have in classification 3, which is all of the assistants and all of that. We have added responsibility for that position, just in working with interns and all of that to get some of the projects completed that we're wanting to do. So that did add supervisory responsibilities, which would make that a classification 4. So since that's already kind of been set in motion, I feel like personally, you all may disagree, but that we need to continue with that plan. So that starts personnel already at an increase of 3.2% over our current year. That's with nobody else getting raises. So with raises, traditionally, the library has given a 3% raise. There have been a couple years, maybe, and I'm thinking of the last, 20 plus years that I've been here. There have been a couple years when things were tight that we did a 2% increase in raises. The official COLA, so the cost of living allowance, is 1.6% for 2020. I would think that we would want to at least provide that. With that, so if we did the COLA raise, it would be let's see. Sorry. It would be a 4.7% increase over this year's personnel expenses. If we went with a 2%, it would be a 5% increase. A 3% would be a 5.8% increase. So really, I'm not looking for any kind of approval at this point, no motions, but a direction for moving forward and what to actually present to as a final budget draft. So thoughts?
I appreciate all the time you put in and what you're telling us. And raises are hard right now. I know two corporations right now. One of them my wife works at, which is a pretty big corporation. They already said no raises at all. So it's like across the board. I've seen a couple places now they aren't even like giving raises at all. And it's a hard decision to make at this time that money just isn't coming in. And and we want to take care of employees. I know it's a tough decision for all of us to make at that point.
I honestly, I mean, I hate to say it all the time, but whatever you think we can do with our resources.
And I mean, you know, keep in mind, we hopefully this is a more temporary situation. Two, we do currently have a significant amount in reserves.
Right. That's what I was gonna say. I know that we have, I mean, we are fortunately in the financial position where we can really maintain and do as we normally would for some time.
Mhm.
I mean, I really don't know. You know, I don't really know the best way to handle it, but I mean, I do know financially we can.
Mhm.
It's, you know, but, you know, it's definitely something we need everybody's input on to make a decision.
I'd hate to tell employees that we dropped $8,000 in gravel rock for the parking lot, but we can't give you a raise. I mean, I hate to do
Yeah.
that because I feel like that's what we just went down that road a
Right.
minute ago. And I wasn't feeling comfortable with that. But now that this come out after that, I feel less comfortable that we dropped that kind of money in gravel and say, sorry, we just can't give you a raise. You know, that to me, that kind of bothers me a little bit, that we can look at materialistic things for the library and not take care of it.
But I mean, we have the resources, we could still do the raise.
Mhm.
I mean, we have, you'll have to say it again. Our reserves are,
Right now, our reserves are $1,485,915.24.
I think I would be fine continuing with this year's, you know, the next set of raises and then crossing the next bridge when we get to it. You know, hopefully things will turn around and improve and things will get back to normal. But, you know, I mean, I think I'm fine taking that money out of reserves and doing that this time. But I do think we need to impress upon people that the situation is obviously very fluid. And, you know, anything farther in the future, you know, it's going to really have to depend. I mean, that's part of why we have this reserve.
Mhm.
I mean, this reserve is there for times when we had unusual circumstances or expenses that we couldn't have necessarily planned for. And to be honest, this is one of those. So I definitely think we should pool and pay them. I mean, that's personally how I feel about it. But I do think in the future, we have to be a little bit more, you know, we'll cross that bridge when we get there after this sort of set of circumstances. Does anybody else have an opinion?
I was just looking over it again. Do we have anything that says that we are allowed, or that, you know, we could be allowed, maybe to word it that way, to each year revisit how we do rate increases? I mean, to my understanding, we don't have anything set in stone, like as far as a policy that says that, you know, it's set for X amount of years before we can.
Right. There's no policy. It really it comes down to it's your all's decision as a part of setting the budget.
Right. I mean, every year we kind of open this and make a decision and move forward.
Right.
That's why I say this year I'm comfortable because we currently have that money. And I think if we've got the money in the bank, it's kind of lousy of us to not move forward with stuff like raises that we would normally do. Now, of course, next year when it's budget time, things could be drastically different. So I think for the time being, I'm comfortable taking that money out of reserves to cover those raises and such. But, I mean, that's for this year. I can't guarantee how I'll feel about it this time next year without knowing what the next year is going to bring.
Well, I definitely would prefer for us not to decrease our programming or the materials that we provide, because I think just from a personal standpoint, from what I have witnessed and participated in, I think that we are doing better than what we did in years previous. And I would hate to decrease that now when we have, for lack of a better term, momentum started.
I agree
So
completely.
I agree with Stacy. If we have the money to take care of our people and to continue operating as much as we can on a quote unquote normal basis due to everything going on, then I am comfortable with going forward with the first proposal.
Right. And I mean, to expand on that, I think we're at sort of a very crucial time where, even though financially, tax revenue and things are not looking as hopeful as we would like, or other means of state and federal funding, we obviously know money right now is very thin and being diverted into other areas. The fact of the matter is, we basically saved for a rainy day, and the rainy day is here. So I do think that our reserve should be used now to continue our programs, anything that we need to use money for, including staff, because I honestly believe that right now is probably when our community is going to really be in need of library services. I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen the articles about possibilities for education next year, alternative schedules for schools. I really think we are going to see a lot of families, students, college students that are depending on the services we provide. So I do think that I think that the money we would pull out of reserves would come back in the end, not necessarily as money, but as a service to our community and that lasting impact we have on the people in our community, who then go and tell other people how important the library is. And, in the end, that's my opinion. That's why we saved. We saved for a rainy day. That's why we have $1 million in our reserve. I think it would be irresponsible of us to cut costs when we actually have the money to continue things.
And just to kind of what April said, when if this turns out to be a more of a recession situation, even moving forward, moving a couple years forward or however long, it's been shown based on past recessions. Look at 2008. Libraries across the board had so many more people utilizing the library during that time.
Mm-hmm.
They're in a financial hard place as well. So I think that adds to not cutting materials and programs, because we are going to have people needing to use those resources.
And truthfully, that's why I'm on board with even using that funding for our raises as we normally would, because to be honest, we are asking our staff members to do something unprecedented themselves. We have asked them to adapt, to change programming, our just like talking about summer reading. The staff can't say, okay, what did we do last year? Let's just change up a few things. They're reinventing the wheel. And that's a pretty big responsibility. And at the end of the day, that's really why I feel like we need to make sure that funding for our programs and our staff, as long as we have that reserve, we need to make sure that that funding is there for them, because right now we're really depending on them to go above and beyond what they probably ever expected they were going to have to do in a library situation.
Oh, definitely.
So are we in agreement then that we will just wait for you to present us the final draft for the budget?
Yeah, I mean, as long as surely Mike and Dave are okay with that.
Yeah, I don't want to take any money away from the people because they work so hard and everything. But do you know how much it'll take out of I mean, just a ballpark figure, guesstimate, how much it'll knock down from the reserves? I mean, I don't want to stop it. I just don't want to, you got to think about years ahead too.
Oh, sure, absolutely, absolutely. So if revenue projections are accurate, and that is all that we pull in, and if we go kind of based off of this version 1, it would decrease the reserves by $133,000.75.
So we still got a large amount in the reserves
Oh
for
yeah,
another rainy day. So I think just go for it, because you guys work your butts off anyway. And then the people are just like they said, if all these crazy schedules come out next year, the people are going to be depending on the library for a lot of things. Because, I don't care what anybody says. They say, well, they can do this stuff at home, but a lot of these people don't have computers at home. So they're going to be depending on the library and whatever, you know what I mean?
right.
So I think it's a good idea to just go ahead and give them the raise that they deserve, because right now maybe they're not that crazy, but when things start back up and the people need them, they'll be there.
Right. Okay, so I will present I'll present a budget based on version 1. Go over it with Stacy and our accountant as part of the budget committee. That way they can comment on any kind of minute details that they might want to change, and I will present that at our June meeting.
That's good.
Sounds good.
All right. Well, if there's nothing else for this meeting, then we will go ahead and, well, before we end, let's talk about what we're going to do for the next meeting. The next meeting will be June 15th at 6:30. And are we going to continue with, if we are not allowed to meet in person, we will do another virtual meeting?
That's fine. It sounds like we're going to have virtual anyway, if they have to use the meeting room for all the books coming back and everything.
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure there would be enough room in the genealogy room to socially
To socially distance and meet.
Right.
Yeah. That's what I am fine. I'm fine with virtual meetings until it's safe for us to be together again. Not
Okay.
that I don't want to be together with you now, but
Right. Okay. Well, then we will just continue that we will say this will be a virtual meeting on June 15th at 6:30. And if there's nothing else, then we will go ahead and have a motion to adjourn.
I make a
I'll
motion to
motion.
adjourn.
Okay. All right. So we had a second there. So all those in favor say aye.
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 All right. I want to thank everyone for attending our meeting.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot.
Be safe.
You too.